Hey everybody. So I wanted to take a little time to just kind of go over some tips for using Zoom. So I know a lot of you may have used Zoom throughout the last year in class, but maybe you weren't the person actually on screen the whole time. So it is a little bit different. So I kind of want to go over a couple things that are really going to help you out as the person conducting a speech on Zoom. So it's real. That's the biggest thing. You want to remember that this is a real presentation that you are doing for a class. So one of the best things that you can do is just kind of pretend like you are presenting in the regular classroom as if you're in front of a class on campus instead of just sitting in front of your computer. That really does make a big difference instead of just thinking, I'm just talking to my computer. So you always want to remember it's real. Prepare. Preparing is the best thing you can do for any of these speech assignments. Take it some time, look over the actual assignment, make sure you know what the expectations are, check out and see if there's a rubric. There normally is a rubric, kind of look over it, see what the grades are going to be done by. That really helps you understand exactly what you need to put into that presentation. You also want to make sure that you know what is the goal of this? Are you informing the audience? Are you advocating for something? Are you trying to persuade us on something? Knowing exactly what this presentation is all about is going to be really helpful to you. So your audience, who is it? Where are they? Where do I look? These are all questions that people frequently have, just simply because they're just not too sure. So your audience will be your classmates. And I know that sounds so silly for me to have to say, but it is. That's who you're targeting. You want to talk to your classmates. But obviously they're not in front of you. So where do you look during a presentation? The best place to look is at the camera. You want to remember your audience is going to be watching you through a video. So if you are making eye contact with that camera, you're making eye contact with your audience. And that's really the best way to engage your audience. So learn the technology. And if you haven't learned it, you're not quite sure, ask for help. It's totally okay to reach out to your instructor at any point if you're not too sure. There's lots of sources for this class on how to use different websites. There's videos. But if you're not finding that, do not hesitate. Reach out. If there is a video, take a minute to watch through that video. If you are still not sure, maybe watch through it one more time just to make sure you didn't miss something in the first time. But again, if you are not sure, reach out, send an email and say, hey, where can I find some more information on this? Or do you mind explaining to me? Honestly, we take time to do those Zoom sessions with you to ensure that you are getting everything that you need out of this class. So it's all about you. That's really something important. I think sometimes we get so caught up in marking off our checklist of things that we've got to get done. But the reality is, even if you're just talking to your computer, you can still get communication anxiety. So if you do, don't worry. It's going to be the same thing that you would do in a face-to-face presentation. And my advice for that is always to take a deep breath. It may sound silly, but it does help. Take a moment, take a deep breath, and keep going. You don't want to stand up there for 30 seconds breathing, but just taking that 2-3 second pause really will make a huge difference in your presentation. Practice, practice, practice. I know you guys have probably heard this nonstop your entire life. Practice makes perfect. Well, we're not exactly shooting for perfection, but practice really will make a huge difference in your presentation. So things that you don't want to do, you don't want to read from the screen. You don't want to have to sit there and hold your note cards. You definitely don't want to cover your face up with note cards or your phone or anything like that. So you're going to want to make sure that you have practiced this enough that you're not having to stare at your note cards. You can glance down, but look back up and make that eye contact that we talked about earlier. Really best practice, standing 4 to 6 feet back from your camera, because it just kind of gives you a little bit more freedom and it's going to make it a little bit more casual. You don't want to get on there and read because it makes you monotone, makes you seem a little stiff. And normally you look very uncomfortable when you're sitting there reading from the camera. Stand up. It really does make a big difference. A lot of the times what will happen is we're sitting in our chairs and we'll kind of spin around in it a little bit. We'll fidget with things that are in front of us. We will kind of get off track and swivel our chair a little bit to the side and we kind of get out of screen. So standing up really does help. It also really builds your confidence for the presentation. So I strongly recommend standing up. So we've kind of already talked about eye contact, but obviously we're talking about it again, so it's important. So make sure you're looking directly at the camera. Again, that's where your audience is at. So you're going to want to make sure that you're taking that time to make eye contact with that camera. You may have to, depending on what your setup looks like, you may have to raise the laptop or camera up if you're shooting from your phone. You're going to want to make sure it's up. What you don't want is for us to have to stare up your nostrils. So you definitely want to make sure that we can see your face straight on. Dress up. So wear pants. I cannot stress that one to you enough. Wear some pants. You definitely want to make sure you're doing that. I know a lot of us are at home. We're comfortable, but pants are cool. We like pants. I'm not saying go out buy a suit and tie, a formal dress, but just something that you would wear to an interview. You want to look student professional. That's really the biggest thing. So practice in Zoom. Zoom, it's different. You're multitasking at this point. So you want to make sure that you are practicing your presentation, but also now you're adding in clicking through visual aid, or you're adding in opening videos or something like that. So you want to make sure that you've practiced in Zoom. That way you know exactly how it's going to look, and it never hurts to record it. That way you can kind of go back and view it and see what things you feel like you need to make changes to. So backgrounds. What's going on in your background? A lot of the times we're living, man. It's hard. So you want to make sure whatever's happening in the background is not going to distract you or your audience. So a common one, dirty clothes. People might have some dirty clothes in the background. Your classmates may comment on it. I won't lie. Pets going nuts. I have several videos where my dog jumps into the frame or my cat climbs into my lap in the background. So things happen. I totally get it, but trying to limit as much of those things happening as you can. That's my best advice. Virtual backgrounds, I strongly recommend you don't use virtual backgrounds. Sometimes what happens is if you move a little bit, part of your body disappears. If you wear the wrong color, it might not show up. So I do not recommend virtual backgrounds at all. I actually kind of sort of despise them. So I don't recommend using virtual backgrounds. So know your sounds. What is going on? So I know my house, I've got kids, I've got dogs, I've got cats. So who knows what noises are going to be going on in my house. So those are things you want to try to find a quiet space for while you're doing your recording, just to eliminate those distractions. If you are going to be doing your presentation outside, you definitely want to think about that. If it's windy and you're standing 4 or 5 feet away from your camera, we might not hear a lot of what you're saying. So you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to those kind of things. Cars driving by, all of those little factors, it really makes a huge difference. And if we can't hear you, it's very difficult to actually understand what you're trying to inform us on, or what you're trying to persuade us on, what you're advocating for. So definitely take those things into consideration. If you're doing something outside, maybe just do a quick test video to see what the sound is like before you actually record your presentation. Lighting. lighting can be sometimes a little bit difficult. You're going to want to be in a well lit room. I try to use as much natural light as possible just because it doesn't wash me out at all. But if you are in a dark room and you're just relying on the light from your screen, it's not going to work out. So you're going to want to make sure you're in a well lit room. Normally, just regular lights like in your kitchen or in your living room or your dining, like all those things. Normally, those work out just fine. Facial expressions. So you don't want to look terrified the whole time. So make sure you're adding in a couple facial expressions, framing your shot so that you can use your hands. I tend to talk with my hands a lot. Even though you can't see me right now, I am still talking with my hands. So, but we use our hands sometimes to kind of emphasize really important parts of our speech. So again, with framing, that 4 to 6 feet away from your camera really helps with allowing you to use your hands, but just be careful. You don't want your hands in your face. So take time prior to your online presentation. Take a little time, make sure you've got everything together. What you don't want to do is start your presentation, you're recording, and then you kind of fumble around for a few minutes as you're trying to screen share or something like that. So make sure you have everything pulled up, everything's ready to go before your presentation. Maybe give yourself little, we've got this beforehand, but just remember, you've got this. So the biggest thing, this is all about learning. You're learning how to become a great speaker. I'm not expecting everyone in this class to be a professional speaker. So you really want to remember, we're learning. This is a learning process. Mistakes are okay. They happen. If you mess up, don't point it out. Just take a pause, keep going. Don't be like, oh man, I messed up. It's okay, I promise. And some final tips. If you're going to have people in the room that you know are just purposely going to distract you, and this does happen, believe it or not, ask them to leave the room. It's okay. This is your grade. If they're going to try to make you laugh, you don't want them in there. You don't want them to mess up your presentation. Go with the flow. So when you're done, just say thank you. You don't have to be like, all right, I'm done. But the most important part, don't forget to stop your video. This has happened many times where people think they hit stop, but they haven't. And then they have a couple conversations afterwards. So I just strongly recommend you make sure you stop your video once you've said thank you. And then really important, review. Review your video before uploading, just because there could be some minor little glitch that happens. You never know. Maybe the audio was off. It's a handful of things that could come up. So just take a minute to review that video beforehand, then upload it to YouTube. Those are my biggest tips and suggestions for recording in Zoom. But if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And I hope you all have a wonderful week.